Coming to you from the Carter Subaru studio. Welcome to the big show. Had a busy weekend. Got a lot of stories to share with you from over the weekend. Rode my bike and watched the Seahawks scrimmage in Bothell. That was kind of cool at Pop Keeney Stadium on Saturday. Of course, nationally, the incredibly sad story of mass shootings in El Paso and Dayton. We'll talk about that a little bit later this afternoon. The coverage of it, just despicable. Just absolutely despicable, the coverage of those two shootings. The guy in El Paso was apparently a white nationalist who had a manifesto, and so all the Sunday news shows focused on him and talked about how the shooting was Trump's fault and it's Fox News' fault and it's white nationalists. And then the guy in Dayton was an Antifa, Elizabeth Warren supporter, and nobody connected that shooting to politics in the media because it didn't fit their predetermined storyline. It's so ridiculous and sad. It's pathetic how these things are being spun purely for political gain. So we'll talk about all of that a little bit later this afternoon. And a personal loss this weekend that I tweeted about, a guy that I got to know real well. So I got a lot of things to share with you throughout the afternoon today, but we've got a primary election tomorrow, and I do not like the way one campaign is handling things. Let's get right to the big lead.
The big lead. Top story.
Well, I had a couple of emails over the weekend from listeners who were really upset about a tactic being used by a local hospital to try to get a hospital levy passed. And I'm going to read to you the email I got from listener Brenda, who said, "When did hospital foundations start publicly shaming the community in order to get a proposition passed? Answer, August 1st, 2019. Today I received a postcard in the mail with my voting record for 2018, 17, 16, and 15 primary elections. The postcard includes a check mark indicating if I did vote and an X if I did not vote. In addition, includes immediate neighbors and their voting records. One more note, the information in the postcard isn't accurate." And then she sent me pictures of the front and back of this mailer. And the listener who contacted me, Brenda, joins us here on KIRO Radio. Hey, Brenda, thanks for coming on with me this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, Dori.
Okay, so I have confirmed with the photos you sent me what the front and back of the postcard said, but let me just paraphrase it for my listeners. So on the front, it says your name, Brenda. Public records from the King County Elections Department indicate you received a C, circled in red, on your voter report card. Get your grade up by returning your ballot by August 6th. No stamp required. So what was your reaction when you first received this, Brenda?
Well, I was pretty shocked. I was amazed to see that, first of all, I got a C because I'm a very good voter. And then when I turned it over and saw that the information had my voting record plus my neighbors,
yes,
I was actually really surprised.
Yeah, it had the first name of your neighbors and their voting record over the last 4 years, apparently in an effort to make you feel competitive, that, I'm going to have a better voting record than my neighbors when they go to publicly shame all of us the next time.
One thought is that they were trying to encourage me to vote, which is commendable, but to compare my record to the neighbor's record, completely unacceptable.
Well, in fact, one thing you wrote to me, because it's the Evergreen Health Foundation that sent out these mailers, and you said, "I give Evergreen Health Foundation an F for building community relations. This is not how you motivate individuals to vote for $345 million of capital improvement bonds. My message at this point would be vote no." And you're not the only person who emailed me about this. And the other one who contacted me said the same thing, that they are going to vote no on this hospital bond. when they ordinarily might have voted yes because they found this tactic so despicable.
It's really, it's not in their favor, to be honest. Every foundation's mission is to promote community well-being and to include people to support all their efforts, and this was in no way supportive of what they're trying to achieve.
Well, and you made another interesting point in your email to me. You said, imagine how they treat the privacy of your health information. This was really a poor decision on the part of the foundation. Someone should be held accountable. So I told you when I wrote back that we would try. My producer, Nicole, called the foundation. They initially told her no comment, and she said, well, we're going on the air at noon with this, so your official comment is no comment. And then they transferred her to a marketing person, and it went to their voicemail. So I still have not been able to get a response from the Evergreen Health Foundation.
That's really unfortunate. I, too, had tried to contact them, and regretfully, the only thing that they would do is take my name and phone number and then promise someone would call me back at some point. I have not received any communication back as well.
Well, yeah, and as you said in your email, when we trust hospitals with our health information, I think for a lot of people, they consider, even though voting information is more of a public record, but I think for a lot of people, when they feel violated by an organization, they feel violated. And for a hospital to be trying to raise money by sending out voter data that a lot of people consider pretty sacred, I think this is a horrible mistake by their foundation.
I would agree. And when I had spoken to this receptionist at the foundation, she had mentioned I wasn't the only caller, but they actually had no idea who created the postcard, they didn't know who authorized it, and they didn't know who mailed it. So really unfortunate on their behalf.
Well, yeah, and that's where apparently they had been getting a lot of calls because the person Nicole talked to was pretty snippy with her before transferring her to voicemail. So yeah, I think they're sick of it. But I want to bring this to everyone's attention because I don't think they should be sending out people's voter record as a motivator to get you to vote. And obviously they think the more votes that are cast, the better chance they have of passing this levy. But I think this was a huge miscalculation on their part, this strategy.
I would agree completely. Very disturbing, shocking, and frustrating.
So are you going to vote no on their bond levy?
My vote has already been cast, so it's sealed and delivered, and it's been received. So
Okay.
At this point in time, I will keep my vote confidential.
Okay, got it. Okay. Well, thanks for bringing this to my attention, Brenda. Appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome. Have a good one.
Okay. All right. That's Brenda, who's very upset at the Evergreen Health Foundation. I don't blame her, for a postcard that sends out her and her neighbor's voting report card. Bad miscalculation by them. And then to not comment to us when we reached out to them. I think we deserve answers. I think my listeners deserve answers. Up next in the Big Lead.
The Big Lead, Big Local.
Although we are now being told by the Evergreen Health Foundation that they will try to get us a comment before we go off the air this afternoon. So we're waiting. We need you. Need to hear your side of things. The Seafair hydroplane race was yesterday, and nobody cared. When I was a little kid, Seafair was a big deal, and I, being the little statistical freak that I was, I would actually keep a grid. All three stations, Como, King, and KIRO, would carry the hydro races, which was bizarre. And I would make a little grid, and I would keep track of every heat and keep track of the winners. And, Bill Muncie was one of the big drivers. Chip Hanauer was always big. You had the Miss Budweiser, the Miss Bardall. I mean, I can remember all of them from when I was a kid. Now, it's just nothing. And in fact, the sport of hydroplane racing is ridiculous. So what happened yesterday is they announced the winner. He popped champagne, celebrated his victory, and then everybody went home. An hour later, some race officials watched a video And they said, oh, he was going too slow before the start of the race, so we're taking his victory away and we're giving it to this other guy. And the names of the people aren't important because nobody's heard of any of them. But it was I believe the third time in 3 years that the hydroplane race has been decided by officials and not by the races on the water. It's ridiculous. And I never cared for the sport even back when I was a kid. I don't know why I kept track of it, but it was all Seattle had. You know, before the Sonics, before the Mariners and the Seahawks, we had the Huskies and hydroplane racing. And that was it. That was the only thing that made Seattle feel like it was big time. But it is a sport that absolutely nobody cares about. It's just a giant party. People go out on their boats to get drunk. You watch the Blue Angels, and even the Blue Angels, we've seen it every year since I was a little kid. And I read a piece at Crosscut by a guy I know a little bit, Glenn Nelson, and he's a Seattle native, and he wrote, if you grew up in Seattle and are of a certain generation, you're thoroughly familiar with hydromania, the collective psychotic break that we suffered during the official start of summer here, also known as the first weekend in August. You likely dragged wooden model hydroplanes behind your bicycle. You probably begged your father to take you to Pay and Pack or Value Mart or whatever other bygone retailer was sponsoring a race boat and handing out pins. And I will say, I did the wooden hydroplane thing behind my bike. We'd drag them, and my friends would have bike races, but we'd have bouncing pieces of wood that were supposedly hydroplanes behind our bikes, so we turned our bike races into hydroplane races. But what Glenn Nelson at Crosscut went on to write, why is there any sentimentality left in Seattle? And he talks about how we've lost the Sonics, we've lost the Central District, Broadway is just a shell of what it used to be here. And he said, the three-ring circus along Lake Washington is starting to feel like that moth-eaten blanket your mother gave you as a housewarming present, back when there were still houses to warm. And I agree with him. When I was a kid, the Torchlight Parade was a big deal. The hydroplane races seemed like a big deal, although I never went to them. I've never seen a hydroplane race live in my life, even though I grew up here and worked in sports for more than a decade. But I still never seen a hydroplane race live because it's just never had any interest to me as a competition. And so his whole point is we've outgrown this. You know, we do have baseball, kind of. Mariners got no hit on Saturday. For a while yesterday, it looked like they might be the first team to get no hit in back-to-back games. They didn't have a hit until the fifth inning yesterday either, after getting no hit on Saturday. But anyway, we kind of have Major League Baseball with the Mariners, but people are getting ready for Seahawks season. You got a hockey team that's coming now to Seattle. People are still trying to get the NBA back here. But the hydroplane races just doesn't matter anymore. And again, Glenn Nelson at Crosscut, he writes, every Blue Angel run does more than burn toxic fuel. It rattles nerves, dishes, and pets in a way that's especially disturbing. See, I still like the Blue Angels, but I could do without them, too. It's not like I'm going to miss them. There was one year a few years ago where the Blue Angels were grounded and didn't come here. I didn't miss them. And it just seems like people are holding on because it's a relic of some bygone era when Seattle needed stuff like that to feel big time. And now it's just an anachronism. And kind of with Glenn. I'm over the Hydros. The Blue Angels I love, but I could do without them. And I just don't know if anything about Seafair Weekend feels relevant anymore. I'd love to know what you think. And again, as a sporting event, it's a clown show. Where 3 straight years, the race doesn't determine the winner, but an official watching a videotape an hour after the race, after everybody went home thinking they had one winner, and then they strip him of the title. It's ridiculous. No sport is run that way. So it's done. But I'd love to know what you think. Text me, 98973. Do you still love the Hydros? Do you love the Blue Angels? Or do you feel like it's just run its course here in Seattle? The Torchlight Parade? That used to be a big deal. It's just not anymore. None of that means anything to our city and our region, as far as I can tell. You tell me if I'm wrong. 98973. Next up in the big lead.
The big lead. Your tax dollars at work.
Well, as you heard in our Carolyn's newscast at the top of the hour, Jay Inslee's security detail is costing us millions of dollars as he continues to gallivant around the country in this ego-fueled run for the presidency. And our news partners at KIRO 7, Gary Horker, he had a piece on how much Inslee's campaigning, because we got to pay for his state patrol troopers that are his security detail all around the country.
At the beginning of Inslee's campaign, his protection unit was just too small to keep up with all the cross-country travel, so it was forced to expand from 8 troopers and a sergeant to 14 troopers, 2 sergeants, and 1 lieutenant.
You hearing this? 14 troopers, 2 sergeants, and 1 lieutenant. You think that our roadways could maybe use those cops? The state patrol troopers a little bit better than Jay Inslee could, but because of an impossible presidential run, he's costing the taxpayers millions and millions of dollars, taking cops off the roads here in our state, and it's all for absolutely nothing.
1 hour of overtime for those troopers averages about $72 an hour. In the month of March alone, troopers worked more than 1,066 hours of overtime protecting Governor Inslee, and that overtime bill was nearly $82,000.
We're going to make sure we do equity mapping.
From March until June, the overtime tab paid by taxpayers was $267,915.
Let's go get this job done.
I'll tell you something else. In Montana, where a Democrat governor is running for president, Steve Bullock, they have a Republican attorney general. And the AG in Montana said, you have to pay back the state and the taxpayers for your security detail, Governor Bullock. And so the Montana governor is paying back the taxpayers out of his campaign funds. Jay Inslee says he has no intention of paying back the taxpayers here in Washington. And by the way, finally, in the big lead.
The big lead. Update.
We have our first poll after the second Democrat presidential debates. Joe Biden's still on top at 32%. Kamala Harris has taken the biggest hit. She's dropped to 4th place at 13%. Jay Inslee, 0% once again. I told you, the more people hear Jay Inslee, the more apathetic they feel about Jay Inslee. And so Inslee is continuing this presidential run, even though after 2 debates now, he's at 0%. Nobody wants him as president. He's costing you and me millions of dollars in protection detail, in lost time as he works more than 50% of the time out of state. And his ego. I mean, he's burning up the planet, too, with all the fossil fuels his entourage is using. It's all about his ego still. When will he drop out? That is your big lead for today.
The big lead on KIRO Radio.
More huge controversy this weekend as Marshawn Lynch had a kids camp, but he ended up swearing at the kids and a local mom. We'll play you the audio, and we'll talk about it with Brock Hewart, the Monday Monson quarterback, coming up next here on the Dori Monson Show.
This hour of the Dori Monson Show is brought to you by Insulation